Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. Let's crack on with today's first story. Much love, guys. Now, before we do get into today's first story, there is a trigger warning on it of medical issues and infidelity, so if you do want to skip the story, please feel free to do so. Timestamps are always down in the description and along the timeline below. Thank you. Now, this one's from a throwaway account, and it says, "Am I the arsehole to divorce my husband and leave him with the kid after finding out I'm not biologically the mum? I can't believe my life has come to this. All I ever do is go out of my way to help others. But on the few occasions I need help, nobody ever comes through for me. I, 36 female, have been with my husband, 35 male, for a total of almost 10 years, married for 7. We had what I thought was my child by surrogate over 2 years ago, because of after 4 years of trying to conceive with no success, despite medical interventions, it turns out I'm unable to carry a child to term. I had always wanted to be a mum. Devastated is an understatement regarding how I felt when I found out I have a medical condition that would make it nearly impossible to carry a baby to term. It was even more upsetting when I had to get major surgery to remove uterine growths with the hope to increase fertility, and complications during surgery warranted a partial hysterectomy involving removal of my uterus only. I still had my ovaries, so we started looking into the cost of a surrogate. It is really expensive. My close friend since college, who'd already had 2 kids of her own, offered to serve as the surrogate for us to cut down on costs. After 2 disappointing IVF sessions, that did not result in pregnancy. She became pregnant on the 3rd try and carried a boy to term for us. I was so happy and busy after the birth, between being a mum and returning to work after a 4-week parental leave. So I didn't notice any warning signs. I should have noticed the red flags and warning signs early on, but did not because I was so exhausted from working so much at my stressful job, and 2 part-time jobs to cover most of the bills and anticipated medical and legal costs associated with this friend becoming our surrogate. I was the primary breadwinner. My friend and my husband started talking more, and I would sometimes come home from my weekend job to find her already hanging out at our house when my husband was there. I chalked it up as innocuous, and it's good for her to know my husband better, since she was in the process of hopefully carrying our child for us. I was grateful to have someone helping us have a child. I also thought it was weird that our son has brown eyes when both of us have blue. Then I found out that while this is uncommon, it's possible sometimes due to many genes controlling eye color. Recently, it all came to a head when I took our son to a doctor's appointment. They did a metabolic panel and blood tests, which showed that he had a blood type that is not biologically possible to have with me as his mother. He's B+, I'm A+, husband is O+. Immediately, I started worrying it was the fertility clinic's fault and they'd messed up and implanted the wrong embryo. I started lining up lawyer consultations to possibly sue the clinic and looked into having a DNA parentage test done. The test showed that I'm not the mother, but my husband is still the father. I was heartbroken and angrier than ever. Talked to lawyers about medical malpractice in the fertility clinic we used. Then my husband confessed that he'd slept with my friend, our surrogate, on a few different occasions during our struggle to have her get pregnant with our embryos. This means what I thought was our son conceived by IVF and carried with a surrogate isn't my son at all, and was in fact conceived the old-fashioned way, which I can't ever do. Livid and absolutely broken at the same time doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. I've been breaking down into crying spells over and over again about this. He claimed he didn't ever think pregnancy could result because he pulled out. He'd always assumed that was the reason for our earlier struggles to conceive, both before my hysterectomy and during the IVF insemination process with this friend. I felt an immediate triple betrayal. From what was supposed to be my husband, my friend, and now knowing my child isn't even really mine. I had such white-hot rage and delirium. I immediately left home and stayed at the hotel for almost a week before asking my parents to let me stay at home for a while. I admit, I left our son with them. I am now filing divorce because he cheated and betrayed me in the worst way possible. I have also cut off my friendship with my friend, the surrogate, and feel afraid to trust anyone else now. I've seen a divorce lawyer to see about giving up my legal rights to this kid so I don't have to face such betrayal or owe child support. My husband and friend/surrogate admit they were wrong and and keep apologizing, but also called me immature and heartless to just give up on my son like that. My parents also say I can't just give up on a kid that I went through so many legal and medical hoops to have. When I told them I refused to stay in a cheater marriage and I'd rather adopt someday with a better, more trustworthy partner. They also told me I was wrong and that maintaining my parental rights isn't much different than if I adopted outright. They said it isn't blood that makes a family. They are all about me divorcing my cheater husband, but keep telling me I'm making a mistake by giving up my parental rights. Some of my other friends agree with what I'm doing. A few admitted they weren't big enough to swallow pride and care for an affair baby, or to see daily reminders of my friend/surrogate's betrayal every time I look at her son. I just want a clean break and a fresh start. I'm also looking at relocating several states away. Am I the arsehole to give up my parental rights in a divorce because a kid I paid a lot of money to have born by surrogacy isn't biologically mine at all? But the surrogates. I'm lost for words on how cruel and calculated that betrayal is. I had to list things down as I was reading because holy shit. OP was working multiple jobs to pay for her IVF and surrogacy, and her husband was having an affair behind her back and created the very child OP desperately wanted but couldn't have herself. They watched her go through these failed IVF attempts, medical procedures, and spent thousands of dollars while this was going on behind her back. And it's shocking at the people telling her that she's wrong to walk away. Husband's betrayal, her best friend's betrayal, the child that she thought was hers but isn't. And it isn't about accepting a non-biological child, it's about being forced to parent a living reminder of the most devastating betrayal possible. And I'm not saying it's the kid's fault because it absolutely isn't the kid's fault either. But a commenter says to OP, no, you're not the arsehole. You suffered a terrible betrayal. Only you can say what's best for you. Personally, I wouldn't be able to look at that child without being hit with a betrayal again and again. Your parents and friends don't have to actually deal with the situation. They don't get a vote. Your soon-to-be ex is a real piece of work. You're immature. I'd want to throw up if I was in the same room with him. Please get some therapy to work through this. Don't let these two assholes hold you back from living your best life. OP says he feels like biological maternity shouldn't matter that much, when it means I am finally fulfilling my dream of becoming a mother. He says that if I adopt someday, I'm still going to have to raise a child that is not biologically mine. He's reminded me about what a depressive wreck I was during the infertility, the aftermath of my partial hysterectomy, and how I put him through the ringer because I was obsessed with wanting to have a child. He claims that I pushed him away with my baby obsession and he couldn't deal with me anymore, and that's why he started straying the way he did. He also says that I can't just turn my back on a child when I legally signed all the paperwork, which is similar to adoption paperwork since the state doesn't readily recognize a child born to a surrogate to be the couple's child, since they base it on the person who gave birth to the child as being the legal mother until the paperwork is signed that transfers the rights over. He also claimed that I'm going to have a difficult battle ahead of me trying to reverse that. Someone says that OP should ask her husband and the surrogate to reimburse the cost of IVF. OP says I tried and failed. The doctor and clinic I complained to said the IVF costs were associated with the formation and storage of embryos, and the procedures associated with the insemination, not the outcome. OP responds on her ovaries and eggs being intact or not. OP says, obviously I have eggs if my ovaries are intact, and they extracted to form the embryos prior to inseminating. There's still eggs remaining there. OP explains the process of the fertility clinic being involved. OP says the fertility clinic was just involved in the egg extraction, embryo formation, and storage of eggs and embryos. Another medical practice utilized the in vitro fertilization methods with the person I thought would be our surrogate. He did not pick the surrogate for us. It was a personal friend who agreed to do this out of the supposedly kindness of our heart, since she already had 2 prior children, and knew that she could carry to term easily, and didn't mind being pregnant. Had we gone through a professional surrogacy practice, there would have been other steps involved, and they would have found a few options for surrogates for us, but the costs were way too high, which is why we skipped some steps and a lot of money by going through a friend that we thought we could trust. Now I feel like I can trust no one. I don't feel like I could try surrogacy again far in the future because my trust in that is broken. Another commenter says, not the arsehole. One of the things that gets me is that you were working extra jobs to pay for the surrogacy, which I'm assuming including her medical bills and financially supporting her. I'd speak to a solicitor about suing her for your money back. She knew that if she was having sex, then there was always a chance that the child was biologically hers. Opie says most of the cost was for the egg retrieval, embryo formation and storage, and especially the IVF procedures, which weren't eligible for insurance cover through her health insurance. Opie onto the surrogate's family. She said she doesn't have a husband. She had 2 kids with a long-term boyfriend, but they split 5 years or so ago. She's not married. She was with her ex for a long time and had 2 kids with him, but didn't marry. They broke up around 5 or 6 years ago. Someone says, did the surrogate sign legal papers regarding the parental rights? Opie says the only paperwork that was legally drafted was for her transferring over her parental rights to us, much like an adoption in the event that there is already a mutual off-the-books agreement to adopt from someone already personally known. We were trying to do it as cheap as possible because we don't make much money, and the cost that could be avoided was sky high enough to the point I took out loans from the bank and then picked up 2 part-time jobs on the side to pay towards these loans. So Opie came in 5 months later and says, update. I'm low on time right now, but we'll be posting a separate update post later. I'm not staying and I'm not caring for him anymore. I was not even offered a choice in the matter at all, which is why I kept telling myself I shouldn't want to. Compared myself to men in a similar type of parented situation, and I've kept myself aloof toward the boy I thought was mine. I have no legal rights anymore, no matter what, because she fought to get her son back. I'm actually a lot more upset about losing this child than I presented in my post, and I'm realizing more and more with each passing day. The choice wasn't mine, and I lost. I posted that I wouldn't want to be the sucker raising someone else's kid, as more of a cope than anything. She got to have her kid. He left me, and I'm stuck with nothing. Opie then goes on to explain about the legal guardian in question after the maternal test confirmed her not to be the biological mother and says, and yes, that is exactly what I've been going through all these months. I have little to no rights. I'm stuck coping with a major loss. My best chance at still being this boy's guardian is to stay with that awful scrub of a guy. Hope he lets me stay and agreeing to let that slaw of a friend have 50-50 and be the chump who still pays most of the bills for that unmotivated scrub SOB. In the meantime, while he continues to cheat. It also came out that she wasn't his only affair either. He's been cheating all along for most of the time that we've been trying without success to get pregnant. So for anyone who acts like I'm selfish or I make their blood boil, they can go fuck themselves because they don't know me like that. And I don't have any real choice in the matter. Oh, dearie me. But now I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this situation? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below, and let's move on to another story. Now, our next story comes from our very own subreddit, r/Mark Narrations. You have your own stories, feel free to go and share them over there. Always a pleasure. And this one's from Pepperjack 1986, and it says, neighbor tries to get me into an MLM. MLM. Hi Mark, this happened almost 9 years ago. My husband and I have been living in our first home for around a year. We'd just had a blizzard that dumped over a foot of snow on the neighborhood, and he and I were busily shoveling our sidewalk when our next door neighbor came over to help us. We thanked him, and since we still had some energy after we were done, decided to pay it forward and shovel another neighbor's driveway. We chose the lady living across the street, as she was a senior citizen living alone. She came outside as we were finishing up and was very grateful. She told us that she wanted to invite us in for dinner that Sunday as a thanks. My husband and I were pretty stoked by this, as we had largely been ignored by our neighbors since we'd moved in. Except for one extremely nosy neighbor who deserves his own Reddit post due to all the years of crap he pulled. I'll be honest and say that I'd been disappointed not to be welcomed to the neighborhood with a pie or something like I'd seen in the movies, so I thought this was finally happening, albeit a year late. Sunday evening we walked over to her house and rang her doorbell. The door was opened by a young lady I didn't recognize, who enthusiastically told us to come in, and that the presentation would begin shortly. Presentation? Husband and I looked at each other confused but sat down on the sofa. A few other women arrived not long after, and our neighbor lady hostess finally made an appearance, asking everyone if they wanted some wine. Husband doesn't drink and I don't drink on an empty stomach, so we said no. I'm looking around for the food, any food, but all I see is a projector screen set up in the corner of the room. There's brochures for tropical destinations on the coffee table, as well as business cards that have the face of the lady who opened the door on them. Husband had been looking at his phone for a while now, and as I'm about to lean over to talk to him, I get a text notification. It's from him. "This looks like a setup. We should go," the text said. I text back, "I think that's too rude. What if she's serving dinner in a little bit?" I was hungry and didn't want to leave empty-handed. He texted to give her 15 minutes, and if there was no food served, he'd make an excuse for us to leave. I nodded to him. Right after that, the lady who opened the door turned on the projector and started her spiel. The long and short of it was she was running some type of travel agent marketing job, where you use your social media to get people interested in traveling to different locales. Then you get a small commission from the company that ultimately did the actual booking, though it looked like the commission was really just points that could be accrued to go on a trip of your own. She boasted that she gets to travel 4 or more times a year to how many points she's accrued. You also get a kickback for every new travel agent you got to sign up to do the same thing. And you get another kickback if that travel agent recruited someone else, and so on and so forth. The neighbor lady host sat there smiling and nodding in agreement, and there wasn't an appetizer in sight, not even finger food or a coffee table bowl of mince or something. I sniffed the air and realized I didn't smell any food cooking. Exactly 15 minutes after my husband last text, his phone rang. He answered it, listened for a minute, looked upset and told our neighbor we needed to leave immediately. She protested that we hadn't heard the rest of the presentation and should stay until it was over, as it was a very special opportunity for us. He said it was an emergency involving my dad and apologized for inconveniencing her, but we needed to go now. She looked highly upset, but what could she do? We left and crossed the street to our house. Husband unlocked his car and told me to get in. This made me worried that something had actually happened to my dad. He told me no, there really was no emergency. We just needed to leave for a while to make it look real in case she was watching us from her living room window. We went to Applebee's and finally got some dinner. As for the phone call he had received, he just set his alarm for 15 minutes and changed his alarm theme to the same tune as his ringtone. Very wise. Our neighbor lady host has been cold to us to this day. She put a passive-aggressive note in our mailbox the next day that stopped just short of accusing us of lying in order to leave, stating she'd just been trying to give us a great opportunity, and it had hurt her feelings that we didn't want any of it. Husband is indifferent to it all, and it had already been a year of none of our neighbors really talking to us, so I didn't feel much difference in her cold attitude to us. The only time she's spoken to us since then was once towards the end of my pregnancy a couple of years ago, where she randomly shouted across the street that she was so excited for the arrival of our baby. She then went right back to being cold to us, so who knows what's really going on with her. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for reading, Mark, and hello to Poppy as well. Poppy sends a hello back. She's sitting right next to me now, snoring away. MLMs, they are so bloody frustrating. I saw someone call them like MLM, manipulative lifestyle marketing, and it just rings so true. It is just so predatory. OP Pepperjack said that, this happened 9 years ago. I don't hear from him so much anymore. It might help that I'm not on Facebook, but that's where I used to see the majority of them. And I'm sure they're still around. Of course they're going to be. But that is so incredibly frustrating that, you thought you was going for a lovely dinner, was excited about it, then find out it's a fucking MLM scheme. It's just so incredibly predatory. When we used to talk about MLMs quite a lot, I used to compare it to someone I know who was on Facebook all the time, and they were doing like loads of different MLM schemes and constantly changing to different ones. And it was sad to see because they was alienating people around them with their constant promotion of it. And it looked like they was buying more of the products than themselves than they were actually selling. So I'm not sure how they was making any money on it. But at the end of the month, they would say, oh yeah, look at me, I'm top of the leaderboard for this MLM, and would occasionally hint on how much they made, which was like such a tiny amount. And also some of the shit that they put in, the marketing stuff that they've been given about what these products can do, just over exaggerating what they can do. And the person that I knew actually believed it. Is it just incredibly sad all around, from their point of view, because they've been manipulated into this themselves to sell it, to them trying to manipulate others to get into it. It literally is a pyramid built of shit. But anyway, I've gone off. I'd be fuming just like you, OP, if I turned up and there was no food there and you had to listen to that shit. But thank you so much for sharing your story. And you hinted at another little neighbor there as well, a nosy neighbor who deserves his own Reddit post. Well, you know what to do. Anyway, just a huge thank you for being here today, getting involved in the story, sharing your own stories like Pepper Jack there over on our own subreddit r/Mark Narrations. Now, just a huge thank you for being here today, getting involved in the stories, your love, your support, your time. It always means the absolute world to me, so thank you so much. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and much love.